Have you ever loaned out so many players that you quite literally broke the game? That's a new one. We have negative 127 players out on loan. That is definitely new. Because bear in mind, we had 126, and then we've just loaned 3 more out, and it's gone, you know what? Minus 127 players. Because I have. Now, of course, I bring you news of us doing the transfer window over on stream today, but much like last season, there is something very, very important that needs to be taken care of first concerning us and a certain European competition, if you know what I mean. I won't say too much more, as all will be explained in due course, but what I will say is that today is probably not a stream to be missed. And the VODs of all the streams can, of course, be found on the second channel. They go up the day after each stream. Oh, and I'm also in the middle of working on a new agent video that will hopefully be out later this week. But bringing things back, Season 12 of Building a Nation with MTK Budapest was always going to be a tough one. It was our first experiment with having 6 different sides in Europe, which would of course mean that the points that we gained would be heavily diluted. And with us overtaking France last season, that actually meant that next year we'd end up with 7, and we just weren't sure if the rest of Hungary was quite ready for that yet. But before that, let's talk transfers. The new scouting method was in full swing this season and was very much being pushed into high gear, finding us some excellent gyms to bring to the club. Did I say gyms? I meant gems. There might have been a gym in there too. I just don't know. But let's start with some of the players that have left the club this season, because there's a couple of stories in here for you. The first out, sadly, was Edgardo Fernandez. Not really what we would have wanted at this point. We were not in a position that we particularly wanted to sell him. He was an excellent partner to Miguel Montiel. Unfortunately, he put us in a position where it was a case of we either sell him or he was eventually going to leave for free. He'd done that whole thing about free transfers or some nonsense, basically. Not the considering their options one, there was a different one. Even though he had like 2 years on his deal, it happens sometimes. It's very frustrating, but we did have to cash in, unfortunately. 35 million pounds was what we got for him from Dortmund. Would you believe it? Dortmund, yet again, getting one of our players out of this. They just love signing a centre-back from us. It was a shame to see him go, but at least we got some good money out of the deal too. There were some clauses in there as well, but I definitely feel like we have missed him this year and I felt a little bit light in the centre-back area. But worry not, we were able to channel this money into other things. Then there was Alejo Fernandez, signed him a few seasons ago from Defensor Sporting, $1.5 million. Did a few seasons on loan at Ferencváros. Wasn't really working out for him once he came back to us because he refused to go on loan. Played a few matches, but wasn't all up to it. And then all of a sudden, a huge bid from the Middle East. And we were like, you know what, £15 million will 10x our cash easy. But there is one other big transfer that's happened this summer, but there's a bit of 7,000 IQ that we pulled off for this one. So you'll recognize Hurley from a few seasons ago. Only did 2 seasons at the club after signing for us for £12 million from Club America. But that isn't the actual story here. He hadn't really done a very good job at settling in during his first season, and things had definitely improved in that second year. However, we found someone that we rather quite liked the look of, a lad from Brazil called Marcio Teixeira, who kind of did everything Hurley did, but a little bit better, and he could play through the middle if we needed him to as well. But we were like, okay, the big problem we had is that Real Madrid were very much interested in Teixeira. But we had a plan. Since they were also interested in Hurley, our plan was if we could get a good deal done, get him off to Real Madrid, they'd hopefully drop their interest in the guy that we wanted, and that would then allow us to sign him without having to compete with them. As you know, that can sometimes drive up wages and also the transfer bids at the same time. So eventually we managed to start a bidding war and got Real Madrid up to £29 million for Hurley. So that's instantly a £17 million profit for us as well, for a player that we never really fully felt like fitted in here anyway. And the moment that happened, they dropped their interest in Teixeira, and we were then able to swoop in. But we'll talk about that in a second, as it's now time to talk about the players that have joined us. The first of whom was literally our record signing. This is Patrice Villaume, young 19 years old now, Belgian, that joined us from Anderlecht for £27 million. The story with him is a simple one. We discovered him a couple of years ago, but he wasn't willing to sign for us until he turned 18. You know the way the drill goes and all that sort of stuff. We'd structured a nice deal that was going to be worth about £20 million, but it wasn't going to happen. Then he did turn 18, and as a result of that, he sort of turned over the professional deal or something, and all of a sudden, they demanded £53 million. And we were just like, okay, that's done then, well, it's not happening. But then he signed a new contract, and his agent forced in a £27 million release clause, which brought him kind of back down into the realms of where we were actually wanting to sign him in the first place. So the moment that we knew that Edgardo Fernandez was going to be going, we channeled all that money straight into Patrice Villaume, 19 years old, and yeah, he's made 18 starts this season. Hasn't been spectacular, but he's done solidly. Has made some quite high-profile errors, which we'll get onto later, but he's still had a good season of development, and I think he's definitely the long-term successor and partner to Miguel Montiel, and that's a hell of a pairing when you look at what he could potentially be. We also picked up Hossein Husseini from Eshtigar for 500k, and he ended up being second on the next gen list this season, which is really saying something. He's had a bloody fantastic time out on loan at Újpest this year, and has just really flourished in that team. And this is Marcio Teixeira, the player we talked about earlier. He's now called Tex-Mex just because chat nicknamed him that. Now, he's got a very interesting story. Now, obviously, we signed him for 17.75 million, and you might be looking at him going, okay, he's good, he's very good, but how has he really been used this season? And this is where the story gets a bit strange. So you can see that as a wide player, he's got fantastic fantastic dribbling, crossing. He's fast, he's highly determined, he's nimble, reasonably nimble, he's got really high agility. He's an excellent player for the wide areas. And you'll look down here. Well, he played 21 matches as a right-sided / left-sided, depending on which side he ended up started on. And he got a grand total of 2 assists. 2 over that period. And I think he went the first 17 matches without a single goal contribution. It took him till like February to actually get even involved, which was mad when you consider how many matches he'd started. And we genuinely couldn't figure out what was going wrong with him. So eventually, on a whim in one game, we randomly decided to start him as a number 10. And he scored a hat-trick in his first match as a number 10, and we just haven't looked back since. You can see in the last 13 matches, all of which would have been played as a number 10, he's managed to combine for 16 goals, 9 goals and 7 assists, including I think 2 hat-tricks in there as well. He's been absolutely unstoppable as a number 10 this season, which has led to some other tactical stuff moving around, with Malero sort of being forced into other positions, same with Navarro, but I think it's made us better overall, and Tex-Mex has become an absolute hero for us this season. Got in the Brazil squad off the back of it as well. Just what a turnaround from us going, probably going to have to sell him, to he's now an integral part of this team. We also picked up Ondrej Bohats from Slavia Prague. Now, £12 million doesn't really tell the full story, as it was actually a lot less than that. It's just got some clauses that if he plays 50 league games for us, it will move up to 12 million. It's actually about £7 million. But he was also on the next-gen list this season, while out on loan at Kijvarda. Not only that, he was described as the Czech Haaland. So that's something, isn't it? He looks particularly excellent. We're hoping he can continue to develop. Next, we have Felipe Capolino. We actually paid £7 million for him, for the 23-year-old Uruguayan striker, but he's clearly a player of decent quality. He actually has managed 12 goals for us in all comps this season, despite barely playing, which is really saying something. Hopefully, we can find him a loan move, potentially. Then we have £4 million on Ramiro Gonzalez from River Plate. He's gone out on loan to Haladash this season. They obviously needed those loans as they were going to be in the Conference League, so we wanted to try and make sure they got some quality players, and he has certainly been one of them. 34 appearances for them this season. It's the perfect start to his career, basically. I think if he can keep developing, there's a quality player, maybe even a future Argentinian international here. And then on the other side of their defence, there's Omar Ben Salah, who we signed from CS Cefax for £6.5 million. But when you find a player, again, of this kind of quality, you have to take the chance on him. So both of those guys have been at Haladash this season and have done an excellent job. He didn't start much in the first half of the season, but certainly worked his way into the first team, as you can see from his progress graph, much of the second half, and has certainly started to improve a lot since then. Then we have Nando. And you're not going to believe this, he was £25,000. I just can't believe it, and that is his actual name. And even that's only because we wanted to sign him 6 months early. We were able to sign him for free, basically, from Sao Paulo. We could not believe it. Look at the state of him as a striker / winger. Ridiculous. I only paid the 25 grand just to get him in a little bit early so we could get himself a loan spell. 34 appearances this season for Kexmet. Now, unfortunately, most of that has been out wide, but when he has played through the middle, he's been absolutely lethal. So it's just great to see him getting football, but for 25 grand, what a bargain. Like, I want to be able to enslave children, damn it. Next is some real good stuff from this new scouting method. The first of which was Alexis Yamin from Deportivo Toluca. £7.5 million, but he is stacked. Now, we already have, of course, Zoltan and Kraus to back up Velázquez, but when the opportunity came along to get someone like Alexis Yamin, I thought it was almost impossible to say no to that. And as a result, that means Zoltan has now gone out on loan for the rest of the season, and Camille Kraus probably could do with a loan as well. We are now stacked in our defensive midfield zone. It's fantastic. And then following our comeback tour on getting the band back together, we actually signed Stefan Carpenu as well. Those of you from the Treaty save will, of course, remember both him and Mihai Alacu from that save. Now, I believe he was actually a left-back on that save, not an attacking midfielder, but he's fantastic as well. £8 million we paid to Cluj, but he's now been upgraded to 5-star potential. I've just noticed that. Still, an absolute monster, and I just don't think we'd have found some of these signings were it not for the slight tweak in the scouting that we've been working with, because we have been really killing it with harvesting every possible wonder kid in the whole world over the last year. It's been amazing. And the last of the Matt overpays for Belgian players, which is a regular topic of these particular videos, Sebastian Gaida joined us from Cercle Brugge, or as we call them, Roundabout Brugge, for £11.5 million, which is far too much money. He's a good player, don't get me wrong, but we massively overspent yet again on a Belgian. But still, he's been out loaned to Debrecen this season, only for the second half of the year, of course, because he was a January signing. But I think he's a good player, and hopefully he can continue to develop. But again, 11.5 is far too much for him when you look at how much Patrice cost us as well. Big fan of Evil Dodger in that. It slaps. As for the league itself, I think we've had one of our best seasons ever, actually. Not in terms of points, we've had better seasons than this, just about, but in terms of goal scoring. 120 goals scored this season, which is a massive step up from before. Defensively, still very, very stable indeed. There were just some very large wins in there. Unfortunately, that cannot be applied to Kijvarda, who, despite being in the final of the Conference League, I think it was literally last season, came 10th this year and have missed out on Europe entirely, despite there being 7 slots. Now, the biggest issue here was that Henning Berg, their manager, left to take the Northern Ireland job, and as a result, they stole Michael Cerventes-Vesta's manager, and he's basically been dreadful. I think he's got like a 27% win rate since he took over, and if it wasn't for the fact that the two Gia teams, the Giamot and the Jury, were so bad, as you could say, the jury's still out on him. And as for the second tier, we're replacing Jury and Giamot with Pakshi and Pekshi. So I guess the game just loves those kind of memes. Once again, though, Pushkas miss out on promotion. That's their second straight season of missing out on promotion from the second tier. But now let's talk about us in Europe, because that has got a lot of things to discuss. So let's just jump in. We scored inside the first minute against PSG and we're able to hang on for, I would say, is a deserved, albeit narrowly, win. And that's a huge one for us starting off with such a big game, considering we had PSG and Chelsea in our first two matches. And when I say Chelsea, I mean Man City, and we wiped the floor with them. Another first minute goal direct from the kickoff from Navarro, then Malero added one. Castillo put us 3-0 up by halftime. It was incredible. These are the kind of performances that we'd really been missing. And to start off with home wins against PSG and Man City, two of the favourites, was an enormous step in the right direction. We then went to Basel and things took an interesting turn. An early injury for Castillo meant that Bobby Tree had to come on, and he absolutely killed it. That they had some ridiculous goals in this game, but Bobby Tree scoring all 4 goals for us, giving us a fantastic result, 3 out of 3, and really showing that he is a fantastic player to add to this team, and he was going nowhere on loan. Unfortunately, we weren't quite so lucky as we fell to a very unfortunate 3-2 result away at Lyon. Just not what you want to see at all. Goal from Montiel and Bobby Tree in there as well, pulling us back. Unfortunately, the winning goal was just a weird one where it was a long range shot and the keeper just didn't move. It just goes straight over his head and he doesn't even attempt to save it. Very, very bizarre, and it's happened a few times now. Luckily, we bounced back with the mother of all lucky wins, having got unlucky in the last game, so we'll absolutely take it. Darla gave us the lead, Savio equalised for Chelsea, but then Brandon Silva and Malero gave us a 3-1 victory at the Bridge, giving us 4 wins out of our first 5 games in the Champions League. We were looking great for top 8, which was only compounded with a really comfortable performance away at Napoli. Bobby Tree, yet again the hero, 5 wins out of 6. We now knew we had a great chance because our final 2 matches were at home against weaker sides, and the first of those was Valencia. Guillermo Navarro, Malero and Castillo doing the business, 3-0 victory, and the last game in the group was an absolute hammering. Malero, Contavrakis and Patrice Villaume in the second half giving us the business. We probably should have scored more, and Red Bull Salzburg scored their only shot on target. You know how it is, but it was another win. 7 wins out of 8, and honestly, it should have been 8, although arguably it probably shouldn't, because we probably shouldn't have won at Chelsea. So honestly, we'll take the 7 wins, as that was enough for us to come second in the Champions League phase. Only Manchester United finished above us, so they were one of 2 or 3 unbeaten sides in that period. They won, well, they drew their other game basically, but the goal difference is right up there. We are just looking like an elite European side at the moment, and it's great to see. Unfortunately, as you can tell, Ferencvaros did not have quite the best time of things, but we'll talk about them a little bit more later on. Sadly, well, we can just tell you about it now, honestly. They only got the 5 draws out of their 8 matches. Unfortunately, the biggest problem was that they got to play against Boda and Partizan, and they had one of them at home as well, and I think they should have done better. Truth be told, they really should have done better this season, and that's a bit of a shame for them to not get any coefficient points beyond this stage, and you can see how that might be a bit of a problem. More on that later. Well, not them specifically, the other Hungarian sides that might have actually been a bit more useful this season. Let's talk about what happened in the knockouts. As a result of us doing that, of course, we got to skip a round, and our reward in the round of 16 was 21st place Dortmund, which we felt was a definitely winnable tie. And boy, did it appear to be that way, with Castillo and Contavrakis scoring a brace each. Jorginho Ruta's goal was not enough. This was not a 4-1 match. I would say that 2-2, maybe 3-2 to us if we're the slightly better side would have been a fairer result, but hey, sometimes you just got to take a little bit of luck, and I really do believe that you just need a little bit of luck sometimes to get to a Champions League final. If you're going to push that far, you're going to have a little bit of luck on the way, and we've had our fair share of bad luck too, so we'll take it. Evens it out. Second leg was much more like it from us, and you'll see Tex-Mex scoring his hat-trick, and I believe this was the first time, and you'll notice this is March when we moved him over to play in that new role, and he scored a hat-trick in this game. Bobby Tree and Castillo getting goals as we beat them 5-1. Again, still fortunate to win by as much as that, and I think Dortmund consider themselves hard done by, losing 9-2 on aggregate. I think we were still comfortably the better side though, just not quite as good as that. But that then set up a draw with Chelsea in the quarterfinals. Now, you know how things had gone against Chelsea in the group. We actually had one, but were very, very fortunate. And sadly, that was not going to repeat itself. Unfortunately, an own goal for Patrice Villaume did not do us particularly any favours. Tex-Mex equalised at the start of the second half, continuing his great run. Savio then scored a penalty, which was another foul from Patrice Villaume, before a ball deflected off the post back into the path of Yosu Bena to make it 3-1 to Chelsea. 2-1, we thought, you know what, we could take 2-1 at home, but 3-1 was going to be a mighty old task. But one thing we noticed prior to the second leg against Chelsea is that they have a right back called Andrew Kunwali. Now, they were playing him out of position as a left back at the start of the next game, and he is not comfortable there at all, has no left foot. So we decided to really target that side of the pitch to try to make sure, take advantage of it for once. Actually did a bit of pre-match analysis. Imagine that. Needless to say, it worked. We beat Chelsea 5-0. 5-0 in the second leg. Malero and Castillo gave us an early lead, and Chelsea just offered nothing. in this match at all. Obviously 5 is very, very harsh on them for the amount of goals, but we were just creating chances down that left side all day long, or our right side. Our right side, their left. Kumwali ended up on a 5.4 rating. I think he had 2 mistakes leading to goals and several errors in this match, including giving away a free kick that Castillo then scored. It was an absolute mauling, basically, but it was just nice that we'd identified a problem and were actually able to make some changes to the tactical setup in order to make a habit of that and absolutely put them in the ground. So a 6-3 victory on aggregate in the end put us through to a semi-finals, much like last year, though, you'll remember. And would you believe it, it was the exact same opponent as last year in Bayern Munich. Could we go a step further? So we decided to do a bit of analysis again, and we noticed that Bayern's centre-back, Batista, was 5'9" and had 7 jumping reach, meaning that if we could get a slightly taller striker in there and maybe get some set-piece opportunities, it'd be an opportunity for us to take advantage. So we decided to start Bobby Tree up front instead of Castillo, despite the hat-trick, because he has a bit more of an aerial presence. And, well, it worked for us, as you'll notice that Lucas Martin Santos scored from a set-piece for us 20 minutes in, and then Bobby Tree scored a header from a cross after 33 minutes to give us a 2-goal advantage. Everything was looking delightful for us until the second half, when Kane Fullerlove scored 2 direct free kick goals. Where have we heard this before? Oh, that's right, because Bayern did this exact same thing to us a couple of seasons ago, but this time it was Szoboszlai scoring 2 direct free kick goals in one game. But at the start of the second game, we noticed that Bayern again don't seem to know what a centre-back is and played another player who shouldn't have been at centre-back. They were playing 2 really tall guys who are centre-backs in defensive midfield, and then 2 really shorter players with no aerial presence who probably would have been better as defensive midfielders as centre-backs. And they got massively punished for it in the end, basically. Vidal took the lead for Bayern, which was massively against the run of play, but Castillo immediately put us level. We then kind of traded blows throughout the rest of the match, but then in the 119th minute, Tex-Mex was put through, a tackle was put in, comes straight to the feet of Castillo, drills it home to drive us to our second Champions League final of the save. I think over the course of this tie, we were the better side and did deserve it, though, is what I would say about that. And that is what we're doing over on stream right now. Full match of the Champions League final, which is against Inter, so we've got a really good chance of potentially actually going for the whole thing this time around. They knocked out Real Madrid, though, and then we're going to be doing transfers after that, so it's going to be an action-packed stream going on right now over on Twitch. So now might be a good time to pause this video, perhaps. We had Kijvara and Újpest both in the Europa League, and to be fair to them, they did actually do a decent enough job getting a solid number of points. Újpest sneaking into 16th spot, which is obviously very, very important. Kijvara did manage to get a few less points out of that, with 11 points coming 20th, but they did, of course, qualify for the next round, and it's just that consistency of having these teams qualify that makes an enormous difference. But then Kijvara were drawn against Atalanta, a very strong side, and went down 1-0 at home. You'll also note that Újpest got drawn against the team directly below them in the division, who they'd managed to just about avoid, so they got 16th versus 17th, and sadly went down 2-0, and you know how difficult that can be to overcome. And sadly, it proved to be exactly that, as Atalanta beat Kijvara 2-0, knocking them out at the earliest possible opportunity, and Újpest, despite winning in that second leg, wasn't enough, as both of them fell at the first knockout round and barely picked up any coefficient points for us. And admittedly, things were a little bit brighter. Molfehevar coming 16th, so at least getting top half, with just the 2 wins and the 9 points on the board, but Haladash really did surprise everybody. Despite a poor start, ended up winning, I think, 3 in a row towards the end to finish on 11 points and only missed out on the top 8 by, well, 1 single point, which would have been a pretty good result for them. But we felt that, honestly, they had a good chance at qualifying anyway, so giving some extra money and some extra points couldn't really go wrong with that. And both of them got off to fantastic starts with 1 and 2-0 victories away, respectively, at Dinamo Batumi and Djurgården. Getting those away wins gave them a great chance at qualifying for the next round, and that's what we needed. And that is exactly what we got, as once again, 1 and 2-0 away victories for the guys ended up giving them both 3-0 victories on aggregate, and they both skated through to the next round, which is important just to keep that momentum going. Unfortunately, Haladash drew against Nice, one of the better sides in the competitions, and went down 1-2. On the other hand, though, Molfehevar with a brilliant 3-1 victory against Lazio, and they were 3-0 up in this game too. If it wasn't for that late goal, this could have been a very, very different story. Fortunately, it was not to be, as Lazio won the second leg 3-0 in extra time and were able to take Molfehevar out. And as you can see further down, it was the same kind of story over in France. Despite a red card for Nice, it wasn't enough, as Dwight McNeil was one of the scorers in a 5-2 win in the round of 16. So by the round of 16 of Europe, we'd already lost every single team except us. And by that, you can kind of guess that coefficients have not been too strong this year. This is the current year's coefficients in order. So we're actually the 7th best nation in Europe this season, with only 16.25, which is still a very good season, but not as good as the season we were losing. Now, the next couple of years are going to be crucial, as they are worse than that. And if we can start to get some of these back again, things could be very nice for us. But you'll see that that's presents us with a problem. France were able to gain a little bit on us this season, but not enough. Despite Nice winning the Conference League, it wasn't enough for France to get back above us. Thank God, because of us, pretty much. Now, if we were to, of course, win the Champions League, it would give us a bit more of a gap, but not much, to be honest. Now, as for the youth intake this season, Emmett was on a fine wire. We knew the ultimatum was, if he didn't pull it out the bag this year, he was gone. I know he provided us Zoltan a couple of seasons ago, but we needed consistency, and we did not get it, unfortunately. This was the youth intake from this year. The best player was actually Basil Puig. Now, he's been upgraded slightly, and he's not a bad player, to be fair. but he's never going to be troubling our first team or likely the first teams of any of the strong sides in Hungary. Let's put it that way. While we're here, I might as well show you the loan farm. You'll note that we have negative 122 players out on loan. So basically, we found out that if you go over 128 players out on loan, it sort of stack overflows because the game can only handle 128. And it means that for everyone over that, it deducts one from it and goes to negative. So we've actually got 134 players out on loan, but now it just counts backwards because of course it does. But look at some of the quality we've now got in this loan farm. Look how many players are 5 stars or close to 5 stars and are all at like really solid teams, including 3 guys at Haladash, which is scary. Haris Zivkovic, 20 goals on loan for Haladash. But not only that, he was #1 on the next gen list this season. For a player that we picked up for 800 grand, he has been a star and could potentially be our future #1 striker perhaps, or just becomes a serial destruction merchant at Haladash and could fire them to being an extremely successful side. If we can keep some of the players they've got out on loan still there, now that they're in Europe still, they could start to really turn things on after struggling a little bit this season, to be honest. Stats-wise, it's been a very tough one for us this season. You can see that both Bobby and Castillo have chipped in with a hat load. Bobby with his 27, which is solid. Castillo has, though, performed better with 32 from an XG of 20.5. Now, some of that as well has come from Castillo playing off the left or the right this year. We've actually employed them in the same lineup at times, but you can see that Malero also has now had the best year of his career for us. 18 goals and 20 assists for Malero, and that's with him basically being moved back out to the left or the right as well to allow that space through the middle. Brandon Silva as well, chipping in with 33 contributions this year. The issue with Silva could be that we may have to lose him soon because every other player, we've managed to find a window that we can extend their contract in without getting the whole red because there's other interest elsewhere. For the last 2.5 years now, Silva has been wanted to the point where we cannot seem to offer him a new contract. And unfortunately, it's kind of getting to the point of make or break with him where we might have to take a massive bid if we can't get him a contract secured at some point this summer. That's the real problem we've got with him. Maybe us winning the Champions League will be enough to convince him to stay. But you'll notice that Navarro has been much less impactful in terms of goals this season. And the reason for that is because he's actually moved deeper to play as the roaming playmaker because he has that versatility and the mobility on the pitch to get around and make that happen. And he scores a lot of goals despite playing extremely deep in the team. So the aim for this year, of course, is firstly to try and win this Champions League against Inter, which is what I'm hoping we're doing right now over on stream. But also, progressing after that is to try to see if these 7 sides can get into the group stages. Now, given that there's only one of them that I think is even going to have any possibility to not get in the group stages, and that's Haladash, I actually think there's really low chance that we don't have all 7 in there. It's just what they do when they're there that could cause us all sorts of problems. But at least we've reached this stage where the money is now flowing in and they're spending it very, very wisely. Ferencváros sold a guy for 17 million last year and splashed out on a load of wonder kids. So their recruitment is chef's kiss. So with that, I don't know what more I can really add other than Champions League final. Enjoy. Hopefully we're not going to be capping this off next season by going, well, that was a bit rubbish, wasn't it? And if you are wondering what happened in the Conference League final last season with Kishvada, although I think I might mention it, they did lose 1-0 in the end to Capital One, as we were calling them at the time. It's a shame, but it happens. That European trophy, I can feel it. Hopefully it's us today. So if you have enjoyed this, drop a like. That'd be spectacular. If you are new to the channel, subscribe. That'd be cool too. I stream on Twitch. You know that. Let's go over there now. And I'll see you guys very soon. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.